Hi, I am Hermes, servant of gods. I have come to this land of Delphi, where Phoebus, sitting at Earth's navel, intones oracles to mortals, what is and what will be. For a city not unknown among the Greeks, named for Palace of the Golden Lance, is where Phoebus by force joined in a union with Erechtheus' daughter Creusa under the rocky north face of Pallas land, the Acropolis of the Athenians. The kings of the Attic land call it the Long Rocks. Unknown to her father, she carried to term the swelling in her belly. That's what the god wanted. When her time came, Creusa gave birth to her son in the palace and brought the infant to the same cave where she had been raped by the god and exposed him there to die in a covered round wicker basket, keeping the ancestral custom of the earthborn Erichthonius, beside whom the daughter of Zeus had placed 2 snakes as protective guards of his life. Ever since then, for the descendants of Erechtheus, the custom is to rear children with gold-studded snakes. And so the girl put what adornment she had with her child when she left him to die. Phoebus, my brother, asked me to do this for him.
My brother, go to the people of glorious Athens, born of the earth. You are familiar with the goddess's city. And take the newborn baby from the hollow rock with his hamper and whatever clothes he's wrapped in, and carry him to my oracle in Delphi, and lay him right in front of the entrance to my temple. The rest, oh, he is my own son, just so you know, I will take care of.
As a favour to Loxias, my brother, the Riddler, I took the woven basket, carried it away, and placed the baby on the top step of the temple. I opened the hinged lid of the contraption so the baby could be seen. At the time of the returning cycle of the sun's chariot, the prophetess entered the god's oracle. When she caught sight of the tiny baby, she was surprised that a daughter of Delphi had dared to cast out her secret spawn at the god's house and was ready to remove him from the sacred space. Pity overcame that cruel impulse, and the god worked for his child so he wouldn't be put out of the temple. She picked him up and fed him. She did not know Phoebus was his father, hadn't a clue who his mother was, and the boy knows nothing of his parentage. As a child, he played, not straying far from the altars that sustained him. But when he blossomed into young manhood, the Delphians made him keeper of the god's gold and trusted steward of all his treasure. Here in the temple compound, his life is devoted to the god. Creusa, the boy's mother, was married to Xuthus. Though he was not native born, he is in fact an Achaean, though son of Zeus, son Aeolus. Even after sharing the marriage bed for some time, he is childless. So, of course, is Creusa. That is why they have come here to the oracle of Apollo, out of desire for children. Loxias takes the lead in this. He has not forgotten, as you might think. He will give his own son to Xuthus when he comes to consult the oracle, and he will tell him that he is his, so that when he reaches his mother's home, he will be recognized by Creusa. But Loxias' sexual assault will remain secret, and the boy will enjoy what is his right. Apollo will give him the name Eon, known throughout Hellas as founder of the Asian land. Well, now I'll move aside into this grove of laurel so I can learn just what is decided concerning the boy.
Hi, and welcome to Reading Greek Tragedy Online. I'm Joel Christensen from Brandeis University, and I'm here with the Cosmos Society from the Center for Hellenic Studies and with the work of Out of Chaos Theater. Today, we bring you back to the scene of Euripides' Ion. Originally, we had a performance of this play that I think we put up in late June of 2020. And this is one of those performances that always bemuses me, but also confuses me. It's one of those plays that we don't, that isn't as popular as some others. It also doesn't come from a mythscape that we might know well, like that of the Theban Wars or Troy. So that's why I'm really happy today to have Nancy Felsen here to help us sort of disentangle some of what's going on in this play. Nancy's a Homerist, a Hellenist extraordinaire, and has spent a lot of time thinking about the place of where this play happens and about the contents of the play. So Nancy, welcome. And maybe you could start us off by situating us in sort of a myth and place and time with this play, because it's not going to be as familiar as, say, you know, the Phoenician women with the story of Oedipus, or the Trojan women, you know, the story from Trojan War. Where are we and what's going on?
Thank you, Joel, for inviting me, and I'm happy to be here. Hermes kind of explained it all in the prologue, so there's not a lot of explanation needed. The prologue I see and the epilogue by Athena kind of frame the drama of the play. The speaker, Hermes, is in a sense in a meta position or a higher position as we are as audience. So there's a kind of outside look at what's going to happen in the play and a big overview of all those events, anticipating in the end that Athena looks back on the events and certifies that things are moving in the right direction and that Apollo needs to be honored. But during the drama, a rape scene and a very confusing adoption scene takes place that is it would involve many members of the audience in terms of the drama of it, the pain of it, the confusion of who belongs to whom, which characters know what information at what time in the unfolding of the drama. So the Euripides gets a lot of mileage out of playing with levels of knowledge. However, we in the audience have already heard we've gotten the whole picture, and we know that in the end, Ion will be absorbed into the royal line in Athens. Now, here, as in most tragedy, almost all tragedy, the mythic setting, which is in Delphi, occurs in earlier times. There's a big distance between regal Athens and regal Greece and the contemporary 5th century in which this is taking place in the teens, probably around 415 or sometime between 420 and 410. So the playwright has tremendous material to talk about the current events, but often contextualizing them within and disguising them within a regal past. So the whole problem in royalty, when you have a kingship, is who's going to be the successor, and what happens if there is no male successor. What happens to the whole family line, and that's considered extremely important. Not so much so in 5th century Athens. That's not, even though there's a sort of continuity of some aristocratic lineages, there's much more of an idea that you don't need that kind of leadership for stability of the polis to take place. But the theme of stability is important in 5th century, and particularly at this moment in the Peloponnesian War.
So Nancy, you've already given me so much to think about. I want to touch on a bit of the things. So one thing, so I love the fact that I asked you a question about what's going on. You're like, didn't you listen to Hermes? Because you should listen to Hermes. And this is something you don't see as much with Sophocles and Aeschylus, right? Character coming on the play and telling you what's going on. But Euripides does do it. I'm struck by the Phoenician Women, which I recently read, where, you know, Jocasta has to come out and explain that we're in Thebes, but it's not the Oedipus story you think you know. So there's that tension between what we're told at the beginning and what happens, which is there to explore. And then I'm fascinated with sort of the stability and legitimacy theme you're talking about, because where a good couple decades from the Periclean citizenship laws, but this is something that's still important here. Why do you think that Euripides is sort of centering this as a theme and sort of the mid-teens here?
Well, I think citizenship is a big theme in the continuation of Athenian democracy, particularly as it is being devastated through wartime attrition, wartime crises. And it becomes a big theme in 403 BC, 404, 403 BC, after the Athenians lose the war to the Spartans. But this whole notion of insider, outsider, of who's a native and who's a foreigner goes through 5th century Greek political history of Athens. The question of whether medics, who are often even born in Athens, but from outsider families, should be given citizenship. The question of expanding the citizenship or restricting it. And this whole mythic theme of autochthony, birth from the earth, which is prominent as a theme in the Erexian family line, has to do with who's entitled to the land. If you're born from the earth, you've got a lot of land rights.
Right. And so, I mean, the story of Erichthonius of this family is that story of the earth-born member of Athens. So we are, given that this introduction is made by Hermes and all this information is given, is this a story that wouldn't have been well known by Athenians? Or do you think it's just a particular take that Euripides is framing for us?
There are other plays that deal with Athenian regal history. And I tried to bone up on it because it's very confusing and there are a lot of variations. Yeah. In some of the versions, Ion is the legitimate blood son of Xuthus and Creusa. And I think there's a play by Sophocles that's lost, Creusa, that has that. But what I was going to suggest to our audience is that Tim Gantz's Early Greek Myths, if you look up the section on Athenian royal history, you'll get the confusing. I mean, there's so many variants that I really can't summarize them well for this purpose. So I think that for the purpose of watching the play, Hermes does what needs to be done, namely, he sets forth sequences of actions which will be happening in this play, and he doesn't want you to worry about how other playwrights are dealing with it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valuable way of putting it, right? He's framing us, he's giving the information we need to move on, but not so much as to distract us. Now, one of the things he mentions just briefly that modern audiences might not know about is the location of the play. So many Athenian tragedies do not take place in Athens. In fact, the majority don't. But this one is specifically in Delphi. So how familiar would have the audiences been? Can we assume they knew it well, given that it's not described or elaborated on?
I think so. And here's I don't know if you can all see it well, but it's the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, which many of us have spent time at and visited. And this is where it's taking place in the sacred precinct. What strikes me about the location is that the play plays with the notion of here in Delphi and over there in Athens, so that there's a directional arrow going from Athens to Delphi. The pilgrimage to Delphi is an important thing, and there's an expectation of a return back to Athens from Delphi. So there's it's almost like there are these two sites and there's a connection between the two. And sometimes in memory, there's language showing that Creusa is still back over there, even though she's here. There's a play with the here and there that goes on. That leads me to mention that there's probably more to say about the location, but I'm going to move in a different direction. That Euripides is like a brilliant precursor of modern psychiatry. He's a pre-Freudian figure, but he has a tremendous insight into the dynamics of families, particularly when there's been disturbance and trauma. And he has insight into the rape situation, because you'll see it as the play unfolds and as it's performed, that Creusa can't let go of her memory of the long rocks where there were two traumas that occurred there: the rape by Apollo when she was a virgin and young, and the exposure that she felt she had to do of her baby. So, and it's also the site where mythically the daughters of Cecrops, the sisters of Creusa, were murdered by their father. And I had a little genealogy of that side of the family.
Erectus.
The sisters were killed at the Long Rocks, and I haven't got a big interpretation of that, but I think one should keep in mind that it's a trauma site.
Right, and it's a site.
A lot of events to happen in one place.
Yeah, it's a sort of a surplus of trauma being attached to that one location. So this is a play that I've only ever seen in the Zoom context. It's not performed a lot. If you're giving viewers sort of guidelines or things to look for in the performance, what would a handful of things be?
Well, I think that thematically, you should notice language about justice, because I think it's a big theme in the play. And Ion as a character is very sensitive and well brought up on issues of justice. So when he hears of the rape by Apollo, even though he's skeptical at first, he wants to he wants to talk to Apollo and tell him that's not right to do that. But there are many moments where fairness and justice, dike in Greek, or dikaia, just things, is thematized in the play. That's one thing. Then, along that line, there's a problem with polytheism as it's conceptualized in the Greek system. The gods are often immoral and do violent things. And Euripides is particularly interested in trying to process what the hell that means for humans. How can humans decide what is right? How can they live justly if the gods are not setting an example? So that problem with Apollo is attacked and assaulted in this play, but whether it's resolved satisfactorily by the end of the play is a question you ask yourself. In other words, Apollo sort of gets off the hook from Creusa and then reinforced by Athena, but the audience is still in a position to make that judgment.
Okay.
So that's one thing. And then I had one or two others. The family dynamics issue is huge in this play. And there's some lines where the insight of the playwright projected into one of his characters into how stepmothers feel about their stepsons or stepchildren, and whether they, all of this, what happened in Rome with dynasty and with murders by stepmothers and all this kind of poisoning in various generations. Euripides lays that all out. The psychology of it is presented, and in fact, even staged, where we see Creusa try to poison Ion, and we see Ion trying to dispatch Creusa before they know the identity of one another. So that brings up one other thing, which is thematically, as in much tragedy, as in the Oedipus Rex, which has a lot of overlap with, which is alluded to by this play in certain places, the problem humans have in their level of ignorance. It's really difficult to do the right thing if you are misinformed. And so that whole problem of how to know enough to act justly is raised in the play. And the fact that there's a near disaster in this play echoes the fact that in the Oedipus Rex, there was a disaster, a patricide and incest. But here, there's an averting, which Euripides is orchestrating, of that kind of mutual murder. There's no matricide, there's no real infanticide, although...
well, now you've ruined the end for people.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm kidding.
Already done.
They've seen it before. Right. All right.
Did it already. Okay.
So no, that was such a rich collection of themes, and I really appreciate it because it sort of helps us see past the weirdness of this play to what really draws it together with other Greek plays. So we're going to take 2 breaks with this one. We're going to see a third of it now, and then have some time to talk about it, and then go back. So we're going back to Delphi to see Ion and Creusa at their first meeting.
You startled me, closing your eyes and letting tears wash over your noble cheeks when you caught sight of Loxias's sacred oracles. What is this sorrow that has come over you?
Stranger, your being surprised at my tears shows you've been brought up to be kind-hearted. When I caught sight of Apollo's halls, an ancient memory coursed back through my mind. My heart dwelt on my life at home, though I am here. Women's lives are full of woe. Gods can be so ruthless. What can be done? Where? How can we recover justice if we are ruined by the injustice of those who rule us?
Why are you so inexplicably despondent?
It's nothing. I've let fly my arrow. For the rest, I'll be silent. Please don't fret about it anymore.
Well, who are you? Where are you from? In what fatherland were you born? What name should I call you?
My name is Creusa. I'm daughter of Erechtheus. My fatherland is the city of the Athenians.
Oh, you live in a famous city and were born and raised by noble fathers. You have my greatest respect, madam.
That's the extent of my luck, stranger. No more.
By the gods, is it true, as the story goes among mortals?
What are you asking, my friend, that you want to know?
Did your father's forefather really burst forth from earth?
Erechthonius, yes. But my birth does not benefit me.
And Athena lifted him up from the earth?
Yes, she took him in her virgin hands. She was not his mother.
Did your father, Erechtheus, sacrifice your sisters?
He took it upon himself to kill the girls for his country.
And how did you survive, alone among your sisters?
I was a newborn baby in my mother's arms.
Is your father actually buried in a chasm of the earth?
The blows of the sea god's trident killed him.
The place there is called the Long Rocks.
Why are you asking about that? You've brought back a memory.
The Pythian honours it with Pythian flashes of lightning.
Honours it. Honours it. How I wish I had never seen it.
Why do you hate one of the gods' favourite places?
It's nothing. Something shameful happened in the caves.
What husband did you marry from among the Athenians, lady?
He's not from the city, but a stranger from another land.
Who is it? He must be a person of noble birth.
Xuthus, son of Aeolus, descendant of Zeus.
And how did a foreigner manage to marry you, a native?
There is a city, Euboea, a neighbour of Athens.
Separated by water, as I hear, from the mainland.
He sacked this land fighting alongside the people of Acropolis.
He came as an ally, and then got your hand in marriage.
Yes, he won me as the dowry of war and the prize of his spear.
And have you come to the oracle with your husband or on your own?
With my husband. He turned off at the shrine of Trophonius.
As a tourist to see the sights or to visit the oracle?
He wants to hear from him and from Phoebus together.
Did you come for a bountiful harvest or for children?
We have no children, though we've been married a long time.
You have never given birth, but are childless.
Phoebus knows the story of my childlessness.
I'm so sorry. In other ways, you are lucky, but not in this.
But who are you? How I envy your mother.
I only know one thing. I belong to Loxias.
For this, I feel compassion for you in turn, stranger.
Because I don't know who gave me birth, nor who is my father.
Do you live in this temple compound or in a house?
The whole house of the god is mine, wherever sleep takes me.
Did you come to the temple as a child? Or a young man?
Those who know best say I came as an infant.
And who of the Delphian women suckled you with her milk?
I never knew a mother's breast, but she nurtured me.
Who, you poor man? I find in you a sickness that I share.
Apollo's prophetess. I think of her as my mother.
What livelihood sustained you to manhood?
The altars gave me enough to eat, and visitors who are always here.
I'm sorry for your mother, whoever she was.
Perhaps I was born because of a woman's wrong.
You have a livelihood. You are very well dressed.
I'm dressed in the clothes of the god I serve.
Have you never undertaken a search for your roots?
I have not a shred of evidence to start an inquiry, lady.
Another woman has suffered the same as your mother.
Who is it? I would be happy if she would take up the search with me.
I have come here for her sake, before my husband arrives.
What is it you require? I will help you if I can, lady.
I need to learn a secret oracle from Apollo.
Please tell me. I will manage the rest as your sponsor.
Hear the story, then. But no, I'm too ashamed.
Then you will get nowhere. Shame is a lazy goddess.
One of my friends says that she lay with Phoebus.
Phoebus? With a woman? Don't say it, stranger.
And she bore a child to Phoebus in secret from her father.
No, it can't be. She is ashamed of being wronged by a man.
She claims that's not so, and she has suffered miserably.
What did she do if she was joined with the god?
The baby she birthed, she exposed him out of doors.
Where is this exposed child? Is he alive?
No one knows. This is what I want to ask the oracle.
If he is dead, how did he perish? Was he killed?
She expects that wild animals killed the poor baby.
Is there evidence that leads her to believe this?
She went back where she left him and couldn't find him.
Was there any spattering of blood on the path?
She says there wasn't. She went over and over it.
How long is it since the child was made away with?
If he were alive, he would be about your age.
The gods wrong her. To leave the mother in torment.
Afterward, she has not had any other children.
What if Phoebus took him and raised him in secret?
Taking for himself the joy they should share is wrong.
Ah me. Her fortune is in tune with my suffering.
And you, I think your poor mother misses you.
Do not draw me into a sadness I have tried to forget.
I will be silent. Carry on with what I asked you about.
Do you know where your story especially falls short?
What is not a disaster for that melancholy woman?
How could the god proclaim what he wants to keep hidden?
He could, if he is sitting on the common tripod of Greece.
The deed shames him. Don't question him about it.
Yet the woman who suffered this tragedy feels it acutely.
There is no one who will give voice to your oracle. For if Phoebus should be made to appear unjust in his own house, he would have reason to punish whoever submitted the answer. Lady, give it up. One cannot question the oracle in opposition to the god. What we strive for by force against God's will, we possess as grudging goods. What they give us willingly, we live to enjoy.
Phoebus, not just then and there, but here and now, you wrong the woman who is not here, though her words are through me. You did not save your son whom you ought to have saved. And though a prophet, you will not speak to the mother who asks if he is dead, so he may be honoured with burial, or if he's still alive, so that one day his mother might hope to see him again. Well, I must leave off, if I am prevented by the god from learning what I need to know. Women's issues are hard for men to grasp, and the good women get confused with the bad, so we are all disparaged. We are born to misfortune.
What is this visitor getting at? Reviling the god in riddles and secretive words. Either she has deep affection for the woman on whose behalf she is consulting the oracle, or she is silent about something that must be kept secret. Well, what's the daughter of Erechtheus to me? She's no kin of mine. It's time for me to pour water from golden pitchers into the holy waterfonts. But first, I need to give Phoebus a piece of my mind. What is wrong with him? Does he abandon young virgins after raping them? Is he apathetic to the deaths of children born from these affairs? Don't do it. You have power. You should pursue virtue. Whenever mortals do wrong, the gods punish them. How can it be right that you, who write the laws for mortals, are guilty of transgressing them? If, I know this won't happen, but for the sake of argument, if you and Poseidon and Zeus, who rules the sky, had to pay the penalty to humans for rape, you would empty your temples atoning for your wrongs. You do wrong, seeking pleasure without forethought. It is not right anymore to speak ill of men if we imitate what the gods consider fine. But for those who teach us these things, it's another story.
So this sort of remarkable exchange between Creusa and Ion set up a whole bunch of other questions for me, right? If I'm supposed to understand, right, Nancy, Ion's been serving as sort of a temple assistant his life. He's grown up there. He has a special association with the god. So he does this all the time, right? He serves people who comes. How old do you see him here? What do you, as a character, how should we read him?
I think he's in late adolescence, like he is. The Greeks have an expression, metron hebes, at the measure of youth. And it's not a single point or a moment, but it's a whole phase of maturation to adulthood. But he's still a neos or a neoniskos, I think it is. He's still at the age where he isn't fully mature.
And so, I mean, this comment, what I really like about Paul's reading of the lines here is he really brings out the sort of sudden outrage and sort of passions of late adolescence. And one of the things I found really fascinating here about Creusa is sort of a very modern, I'm here to tell you about a friend of mine take. Can you give our audience, because we, the topic of rape and childbearing is always an urgent one, but especially over the past few weeks in the US, it's got even more purchase than before. When she's talking about her shame and her relationship to this experience, how would a Greek audience have processed it sort of differently from the way we might?
Well, there is a shame, eidos, of a young girl even to be seen publicly with a young man or a man. And you can get a flavor of this in the Odyssey when Nausicaa is going back with the stranger who is Odysseus back to her parents, back to the palace. And she doesn't want anybody to think that she's flirting with him, even though she is, or that she's with him. She doesn't want to lose her reputation. So there's a strict code of shame for a young girl to be out in public. It doesn't happen. And if you go back to, say, love poetry, it's usually a girl who is somehow alone in a garden and gets taken advantage of. But in mythic stories, it's often a god who simply desires and simply takes. So there are a lot of rape stories about Poseidon, about Zeus, and Apollo is particularly active in grabbing young women. You have an example in Pindar in the case of Cyrene, where he is desires her and admires her prowess as she fights with a lion, and then he asks Chiron, the advisor, whether he should take her on the spot. And Chiron suggests he be a little more discreet, and slow down a bit. But there's a kind of impetuosity that the adolescent, near adult, Apollo's always at the edge of being a youth and becoming a man. And he's particularly represented as actively seducing or raping young virgins.
Right. And this is really clear from, if you get to say, Ovid's Metamorphoses, where this is almost his whole
Daphne.
his whole thing. And I think, you know, we've in the years that we've taught myth, we've definitely changed the way we talk about this, right? I know my kids are younger, they're reading D'Aulaire's Greek myth now. It's like, well, Apollo loved Daphne, and you know, I shrug, I shiver. I'm like, well, it's worse than that. But this comment that that he makes, that Ion makes, about how how heavy the penalty would be if Zeus, Poseidon, and Apollo were to pay back or pay for their rapes, seems a little strange, right? Is he conceiving of sort of an Athenian jurisprudence, like you have to pay certain amounts to their families, or what's in his mind in terms of justice there?
Well, I think that by Euripides' time, and partly due to his angle and his character, there's a change in outlook toward female autonomy and female respect for the female. So a lot of his characters are able to voice their outrage at being treated as second-class figures in the society, second-class citizens. And Euripides is particularly sympathetic to female characters. And so to have justice include the plight of a young virgin is not un-Euripidean, it's very Euripidean. He also interrogates the whole polytheistic system.
Well, that's what the line I wanted to give you to riff on before we turn back to the performance is one of the later ones he said, which is when speaking to Apollo, he says, "You have power, you should pursue virtue."
Yes. Yes.
Is this part of sort of Euripidean like atheism? Is it also about politics in Athens? Like, what would you do with this line?
I think that it has resonance with the Athenian abuse of power, which Thucydides critiques in various ways when he has in the Melian dialogue and several of the dialogue where he has the principle of might makes right, or of you can do it, it's okay. He critiques that very severely in those lines. So it's kind of a political critique of abuse of power without virtue, and also it's very much embedded in the whole rise to power of Zeus in the Theogony, and it's a critique of might makes right, or dominating others in that context too.
And sort of how much it resonates depends on where we date this play, right? If it's, and because it may actually be post-Melian, post the destruction of Melos, but it's definitely well set in the Peloponnesian War.
Right.
So I think you know, we're going to move into the Athenian, okay, go ahead.
The whole Athenian Delian League is based, I mean, as you move forward in time under Pericles, and especially, there are various actions that are taken only for the benefit of Athens and not in any kind of reciprocity with the members of the league. And so there's a lot of disgruntlement at abuse of power at the top with Athens.
And
that's one of the issues of the war.
And that really sort of maps on in a well, but also disturbing way to sort of the way that these gods have treated mortal women in myth.
Yes.
And so we'll look for that and justice and more about the gods in these next scenes. And thank you, Nancy, for that. So we're back to Ion and Creusa in Delphi.
The view of things seen from afar and up close is not always the same. I'm happy with the way my luck has turned and finding you as my father. But hear me out, father, what goes through my mind? They say the renowned city of Athens is born of the earth and not an alien people of immigrants to the land, so that I will come in plagued by two drawbacks. I'm the son of a foreign father and a bastard. With these disadvantages, I will remain powerless and I'll be called a nobody from nowhere. But if I have ambitions to the first rank of the city and strive to be somebody, I will be the enemy of the disenfranchised. Excess makes for bitterness. Those who are sensible as well as good and capable and keep their peace and do not aspire to public life will take me for a fool and a laughingstock for not keeping my head down in a city eager to find fault. But if I attain a higher station than those already having a say in the city, I will be stonewalled by their votes. That's how these things go, Father. Those who hold sway in cities and reach high office are most virulently opposed to any rivals. And then I will be coming into another's home as an outsider, to a woman who is childless. She shared your fortunes with you before, but has no part in this, and by herself will bear this change of fortune with resentment. She will have good reason to hate me when I stand at your side, while she still has no child of her own, and will look with bitterness on all you love. And then either you will give up on me and see to your wife, or you will honor me and turn your home into chaos. Think of the bloodbaths and deaths by lethal poison that women have devised for their men. And besides, I feel pity for your wife, Father, as she grows old without children. With her noble ancestry, she does not deserve the curse of barrenness. The face of absolute power, so foolishly overrated, it may look sweet, but it is bitter to live in the same space. Who really can feel happy? Who can be comfortable if he spends his life in fear and suspicion of conspiracy?
Mistress, we have been played false by your husband and his machinations. I feel your pain, and we are insulted and cast out of the house of Erectheus. I'm not saying this because of any animosity toward your husband, but I love you more than I care for him. First, he immigrated to this land as a stranger. Then he married you and took your home and inheritance. Now he's found in secret to be producing children by another woman, and you will suffer this, the final evil of all. A motherless, no account, born from some slave woman, is brought in as master of your house. Therefore you must do the womanly thing. Either taking up the sword, or with some guile, or using poisons, you must kill your husband and the boy before death comes to you from them.
Oh, my life. How can I keep silent? What is there left to stop me? What prize for virtue am I competing for? Hasn't my husband turned out to be a traitor? I am deprived of a home, deprived of children. My hopes are dashed, which I wanted to manage honourably, but was not able, though I hid my union and hid my childbirth with all its tears. By the starry seat of Zeus, and the goddess above my own city's peaks, and the sacred shore of Triton's deep-watered lake, I will no longer hide the union. By unburdening my chest, my heart will feel lighter. My eyes are dripping with tears. My soul is in torment, bombarded by cruel plots of men and immortals, whom I will reveal as thankless betrayers of marriage vows. I make this reproach to you, son of Leto, that I address by the light of day. You came to me, your hair gleaming with gold, when I was gathering in my lap saffron strands reflecting the golden rays. You took me by my white wrists to lie on the floor of the cave, as I cried aloud, "Mother, mother." You, a rapist and a god, you brought me to shame, doing your part in service to love's goddess Kupris. And in my misery, I bore you a son whom I cast out because of a mother's fear. I lay him in your bed, where you harnessed me, a woman in despair, in this tragic coupling. Ah, me. And now he is lost, seized as a feast by carrion birds, my son and yours. I address the son of Leto, who allots the responses at the golden steps and dais at Earth's centre. My voice is a herald into the light. Oh, dastardly, vile seducer, who sends home a son for my husband, when no favours have been given. But my child and yours is gone, preyed on by birds, has lost his mother's birthday tokens.
I was just draining out a surge of evils from my heart when your words caused another to flood over the side. In making these claims, you've moved from the ills of today into the evil paths of still other tragedies.
If you had seen the baby stretching out his hands to me,
Reaching for the breast or a mother's embrace.
And when he didn't get it, he suffered from my neglect. You know what to do. Take this gold, gift of Athena, from my hand, an ornament from the distant past. Go where my husband is holding sacrifice in secret. When they finish the feasting and are about to pour libations to the gods, keep this hidden in your robe and pour it into the young man's drink. Just his. Be careful to keep it separate from the others. That young man who is on his way to being master of my house. And if it reaches his gullet, he will never reach the glorious city of Athens. But death will detain him here.
So in our excitement to talk about some of the themes, we neglected to sort of give the plot to the audience. So part of what happens in the section that they took out is that Creusa has come to Delphi, as Nancy told us, with her husband Xuthus to inquire about why they can't have children. And in one of the scenes that we didn't see, Xuthus was essentially granted Ion as a child by Apollo. And so in the scene that we just saw, Creusa is reacting to this because essentially what will happen is she will be disenfranchised, she will be childless, and will be taken outside of Athenian politics. So Nancy, can you talk a little bit about sort of the menace there and how we get to that moment and why Creusa feels sort of motivated to poison Ion here?
Okay. I just first want to go back and say that if you're looking at the plot line, there's not one, but if you think in terms of the perspective of each of the important characters, the motivation of coming to Delphi is different for Creusa than it is for her husband. She's ostensibly trying to find out if they're going to have children, as he is, but she has a secret desire to find out what happened to the infant that she exposed on the Acropolis at the Long Rocks. So she doesn't make any connection for a long time between the plight of the mother of Ion and her own plight. But the playwright Euripides gives these moments of uncanny similarity where there is tremendous sympathy, the one for the other, between Ion and Creusa. And so the ignorance is playing a really important role. Amidst that ignorance, when she hears that from the chorus, who are sworn to silence, but who break that silence, the chorus of young women who are her slaves. They are loyal to her, so they don't obey Xuthus in his plan to keep the identity of Ion as his biological son from Creusa. He has stated that plan. And she feels completely betrayed by her husband, that he has deceived her and that he's planning a sort of takeover. And so the chorus itself of Athenian women, of young women, is on the side of murdering both the foreigner Xuthus, who is not a real Athenian, and Ion, who's an imposter. So there's a whole narrative that's, I call it a virtual narrative, but with narratologists, but it's a whole interpretation of what's happening that turns out to be completely off and completely wrong, but it motivates Creusa to become a murderess, like Medea in the Medea of Euripides, and other murderous female characters in tragedy. So it does come out. I mean, because the chorus endorses it, the old man who's a servant endorses it, who was from her side of the family and nurtured Erechtheus and raised him. Because of that, it's kind of treated as a natural outcome. She's in a dilemma.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, I was just saying, yeah, so we'll just, there's a potentially problematic stepchild, so we'll just poison them to get rid of them, right? So, and, we're going to get back to the play in just a minute, but I'm wondering, each time I read this play, I worry about its tone. Maybe I don't worry, I'm sort of like drawn into it, because in some ways it's sort of, the comedy of mistaken identities takes us in one direction, but we're definitely playing it here as very serious. Do you think on the Athenian stage that there was more play to it, or is this a play that we should take with sort of more severity than others?
Before, I wanted to ask if Creusa or Ion had something to say about any of this, because I feel like we're dominating the.
Well, we'll bring them in at the end. We
Okay.
gotta let them set up now and do their costume change.
Okay. Yeah, I think that there's genre playing, there's fiddling with genre. I think that there's some question as to how this is going to play out, whether there's going to be what Aristotle calls a recognition, an anagnoresis, whether the complication, which he calls desis or binding, is going to find a lusus, a resolution, or a denouement that is unviolent and kind of benign, as opposed to a disaster. So there's a kind of genre issue that is being played out, and Euripides is toying quite a bit with this well-established genre of tragedy.
And that's, I think anytime we bring Aristotle to bear on Euripides, I feel like it's dangerous, because Euripides is always playing against that type, right? But that's part of, I think, what makes him such a rich and an enjoying playwright to work with, is that he's conscious of those motifs and working against them. So I think we'll probably just watch the rest of the play now, but in looking for that end of the play, for the possibility of resolution, what are some things that you would tell an audience to sort of wait for in this particular play?
Well, one thing to ask is whether the moment when Creusa and Ion realize their relationship, whether that's a believable moment, and whether it happens with the right tempo, whether there's a sense that we are completely ready for this kind of solution to what could have been a mutually murderous plot. So there's that. Then I think the gender issues we haven't talked about very much, but the question of a woman's dilemma, even a royal woman, and powerlessness if she gets on the wrong side of the powers that be. I think that's treated. Trying to think if there are some other issues that struck me.
Well, I think with sort of the exploration of justice, the place of the gods, and the theme of knowledge, that sets us up pretty well to sort of figure out what happens at the end of the play.
Yeah.
So we'll go for the last few scenes with Creusa and Ion, and we'll come back, Nancy, and then see what we can figure out from yet another viewing.
Okay.
So thank you, and we'll back to the performance.
Look there. My bitter foes are upon us.
Cephasus, with your bullish face. Look what you produced as a descendant in this woman. A viper, a serpent, her eyes flashing a blood-red flame. Her daring knows no bounds, and she's as potent as the Gorgon's blood with which she meant to kill me. Well, the altar and house of Apollo will not protect you. Any pity for you belongs more to me and my mother. She may not be with me in person, but the name of mother is never far from my heart. Look at the criminal mind at work. From one scheme she weaves another. She crouches at the god's altar so she will escape the just penalty for her deeds.
You cannot kill me. I give my body to the god as a sacred possession.
And yet you tried to poison one who belonged to the god.
You no longer belong to the god, but to your father.
I have just met my father. I'm speaking of my real father.
I wanted to kill you because you were an enemy to my house.
I didn't invade your land leading an armed force.
You did. To set fire to the house of Erechtheus.
Where are the torches? Where are the blazing fires?
You plan to live in my home, to take what's mine by force.
You were trying to kill me in fear of my intentions.
So I would not die if they became more than intentions.
With no child of your own, you resent my father finding me.
And you were going to usurp the homes of the baron.
Leave the altar and the god's holy seat.
Give that advice to your mother, whoever she is.
Won't you accept the consequences of trying to kill me?
Yes, if you are willing to slaughter me in this sacred space.
Whoa. What a mess. The gods have laid down these laws badly for mortals and have not used wise planning. It is not right that the unjust can sit at the altar, they should be driven away. It is not right for the wicked hand to touch what belongs to the gods, but only the just. Those who have been wronged should sit at the holy place. The good and the evil going to the same altar ought not to have equal protection from the gods.
An assistant comes in carrying a basket, the very basket that was there when Ion was brought to Delphi.
Ion.
The two, Ion and Creusa, rush to each other after the intervention of the prophetess. Ion has a recognition of what has happened, and he looks to
My
Creusa.
eyes are brewing with as mind me there, where my mother, after a secret liaison, in secret bargained my life away, did not give me her breast, but left me nameless in the god's temple where I lived the life of a slave. The god's part has been fine, but my fate is grave. For the time I should have basked, cradled in my mother's arms, and taken a child's joy in life. I was deprived of my own dear mother's nurture. And my mother too is wretched because she suffers the same grief, deprived of her child as a source of joy. The truth must be uncovered, and whatever is to be, must be endured. I cannot escape it. Sacred fillets, what is it that you have kept hidden so long? And fastenings which guard things precious to me. Look at this, the covering of the rounded chest, how it has not gotten old. Through some divine working, there is no mildew in its woven structure. But a long time has passed in between for these treasured objects.
What is this apparition I see beyond my wildest dream?
You, be quiet. You've already caused me enough harm.
There is no place here for silence. Do not advise that. I see the carrier in which many years ago I placed you. Oh, my child, when you were still a newborn baby at the cave of Acropolis and under the ledge of the long rocks. I shall leave the sanctuary of this altar even if I must die.
Seize her. She must be maddened by the god to rush away from the altar and images of the god. Secure her arms.
Go ahead and kill me. I will take hold of this and you and what is hidden inside that belongs to you.
Isn't this awful? I'm seized as property by trickery.
No, but you are found dear to those who love you.
I dear to you, and yet you secretly tried to kill me.
Yes, as my child, which is the dearest thing to a parent.
Stop weaving your lies. I'll catch you yet.
I hope it comes to that. I'm all for it, my son.
This chest, is it empty or does it contain various items?
What you were wearing when I exposed you.
Oh, and will you be able to tell me what they are before seeing them?
If I cannot, I will submit to my death.
Tell me then. Your audacity is disquieting to me.
Look for a weaving I made as a child.
What was it? Examples of young girls' handiwork are common.
Not finished, but more like a sampler from the loom.
What does it look like? I don't want to be taken in by this.
A gorgon in the centre of the garment's fabric.
Oh, Zeus. What destiny is hunting me out?
It is surrounded with a fringe of snakes, like the Aegeus.
This is the weaving. We find it a bit mysterious.
The girlish working of my loom so long ago.
Anything else? Or did you get lucky in only that one?
2 serpents glistening with solid gold jaws. A gift of Athena, with which she tells us to rear children as an imitation of Erichthonius of olden days.
What is it for? Tell me how the golden ornament is used.
For the newborn baby to wear around his neck, my child.
These are in here. And the third, I want to know the third.
Back then, I put around you a garland of olive, which Athena's rocky ground first brought forth. And if it's there, it has never lost its fresh green colour, but still flourishes because it's from an incorruptible olive.
My dear, dear mother, I'm so glad to find you.
My son, light brighter than the sun to your mother. I know the God will forgive me. I have you in my arms, found against all expectation, whom I believe to be living down below with the dead in the earth, in Persephone's hands.
My dear mother, I seem to move between the worlds of the living and the dead.
Oh, bright unfolding of the shining ether, what sound shall I cry out? How has this unexpected sweetness happened to me? Where has my happiness come from?
For me, mother, anything was likely to have happened rather than this. But I am yours.
I am still trembling in fear.
In fear that it isn't me you hold, though you do.
Yes, I had thrown all my hopes away. Ah, woman, where was it? Where did you take my baby into your arms? In whose hands did he come to Loxias halls?
This was a god's doing. May we enjoy our good luck in the future after our luckless past.
My child, your birth was full of tears. You were parted from your mother's arms amid cries of anguish. But now with my lips pressed to your cheeks, I draw breath, feeling a most sublime pleasure.
My own pleasure is the same as yours.
I am no longer childless. Our home has a hearth, the land has its kings, and Erechtheus is young again. The home of the earthborn no longer looks on darkness, but looks up on the sun's shining rays.
Mother, father should be here too, to share in this gladness that I've given you both.
My son, what are you saying? How I am caught out.
What do you mean?
You were fathered by You were fathered somewhere
my.
else.
Your girlhood bore me as your bastard.
Not with wedding torches or dancing did my marriage rite bear your dear person.
Am I ill-born, mother? Where did I come from?
Let the Gorgon killer know.
Why do you say that?
She who presides over my rocky land on the olive-bearing hill.
Your words are obscure and not at all clear.
By the nightingale's rock face with Phoebus.
Why speak of Phoebus?
I had a secret liaison.
Tell me, what you are saying is my good fortune?
In the 10th circle of the months, I bore a child in secret to Phoebus.
That's welcome news if what you say is true.
Your mother's maiden work I put around you as baby clothes, the back and forth of my loom. I did not hold you to my breast for milk, a mother's nourishment, nor bathe you with my hands. But in an empty cave as food to be preyed on by the sharp talons of birds, you were left to go to Hades.
What terrible daring, mother.
Crippled by fear, my child. I threw away your life. Against my will, I meant to kill you.
And by my hand, you nearly died.
Oh, we have had a terrible time of it, and still are. We are twisted this way and that by ill fortune, and then again by good fortune. But the winds keep shifting. At last, let them stay put. The old evils were enough. Now let a fair wind take us away from troubles, my child.
Oh, chance. You have shifted for thousands of mortals, now to be unhappy and then again to do well. To what a turning point of life we have come. Almost to slay a mother and suffer unworthily. Oh, is it possible to understand in the shining courses of the sun all these changes day after day? In you, mother, we have made a discovery dear to us, and I'm sure my origin cannot be disparaged. But I want us to talk alone about other things. Come here. I want to whisper words into your ear and to hide them in darkness with the deeds. Look, mother, to see if in a weak moment, as happens to young women, you stumbled into a secret liaison and then laid the blame on the god, and to avoid any disgrace that would fall on me, you claim you bore me to Phoebus, though I'm not the gods.
By Athena Nike, who carried her shield in her chariot, beside Zeus against the children of the earth, I swear no mortal man is your father, my son, but Lord Loxias, the very one who raised you.
How is it that he gave his own child to another man and said that I am Xuthus's natural son?
Now that you are Xuthus, but he is giving you as a gift, though you are his own. As a friend might give his son to a friend to adopt as his heir and master of his house.
Is the god true? Or are his oracles in vain? It troubles me in my mind, as is natural.
Listen then, son, to what has come into my mind. Loxias has settled you in a noble home for your benefit. If you were called the gods, you would not ever have had a traditional inheritance, nor a father's name. How could it be when I hid my liaison and tried to kill you in secret? It is to help you that he gives you to another father.
I will not treat this so lightly, but I will go into the temple and inquire of Phoebus whether I am born of a mortal father or of Loxias. Oh, whoa, whoa. What god is above these halls, sweet with incense, revealing a face silhouetted in the sun? What god is this?
Do not run off. I am not an enemy to flee from, but friendly to you both here and in Athens. I have come here, Pallas, the namesake of your land, in all haste from Apollo himself, who did not want to come into your sight, to avoid blame that would arise from his earlier act. But he sent me to pass on these words. This woman bore you to Apollo, who is your father, and he gave you to whom he gave you, not because he's your father, but so that you might become part of a noble family. When the whole affair was brought into the open, he was afraid you would die from your mother's plot, and she from yours. He saved you through his own devices. Lord Apollo kept these things secret, but intended to make it known to you in Athens that you were born from her and from himself, Phoebus, your father. To bring closure and extend the gods' oracles, for this I yoked my chariot. Hear me out. Take your son and go to the land of Acropolis. Seat him on the royal throne, for he is born in the line of Erectus, and it is right for him to rule my land. He will be famous throughout Hellas. His children, 4 of them, born from one root, will give their names to the land, to the different tribes. The children born from them will in turn, at the appointed time, colonize the island cities of the Cyclades and continental coastlines, which will increase the power of my land. They will dwell on the plains of 2 continents on opposite sides of the straits, Asia and Europe. After this man's name, they will be called Ionians, a name everyone will know. Apollo handled all these details very well. First, he caused you to deliver without sickness, so your family did not know. Then, when you gave birth to his children and exposed him in these baby clothes, he instructed Hermes to pick the infant up and bring him here. He saw to his nurture and did not let him die. Now, keep it quiet that this is your child, so that Xanthus can keep his pleasant delusion. And you, in turn, lady, may enjoy your blessings. Farewell now, from this respite from troubles. I promise a happy future for you all.
Oh, Pallas, daughter of Zeus on high, I do not question your words. No, I am convinced that I am the son of Loxias and this woman. Even before, it was not too much to believe.
Hear what I have to say. I commend Phoebus, though I did not before, because though he neglected his son, he returns him to me now. These doors and the god's oracular shrine are a welcome sight, though I shrank from them before. But now, with gladness in my heart, I hold my hands on the knocker and greet these temple gates. My child, let us go home.
How did they do that last scene? Are they in the same place?
They are, Nancy. I think part of the joy of Zoomcraft, as we come to call it, is you can build off people's expectations and then show, hey, we've been in the same place all the time. The
Wonderful
ending of
wonderful acting.
Beautiful. We'll bring them in a minute. We can go back to gallery view then. But how do you make sense of this final speech of Athena, wrapping all this trauma and all these problems up into this prophecy of the future that seems to lead to Athenian empire? What just happened to us, Nancy?
Well, for one thing, in terms of the plot line, all along, Apollo was orchestrating the life of Ion and even the reunion with Creusa. So there's a sense, again, of Apollo being outside of the world of the text, of the world of the drama, pulling strings and moving characters around and so on. It's almost as if it's taking a perspective on the two-layered worlds of the Iliad and the Odyssey, where you have things happen among humans and you have the gods working with their destinies and moving characters around. And usually when you're talking about it in Homer, at least this is how I teach it, you have a kind of double causation where humans do have power to make choice and are responsible for their choices. But the gods are also, it's like a double motivation. Things go on because of the gods, and at the same time because of the character of the human beings. Now Euripides, toward the end, say this is around 415 or so, he's been very critical and interrogating this notion of causation. And yet, in terms of the conventions of tragedy, he does sort of restore the dignity of Apollo, even after his injustice and his rape of Creusa. So there's a kind of, you can't break it down and say he's on one side or the other. I don't think that you get a single perspective on how to look at these issues, but you do get provoked to torture yourself and thinking about, do we really want to worship a god who has been a rapist and perhaps will continue to be a rapist? That's raised as a question, and it's a very chilling question.
And so that provocation, I think, is brought to the fore even more with Creusa having the last comment in the play, right? So much of the play has been about her experience, and then the last lines, "I commend Phoebus, although I did not before."
Yeah.
I mean, how does that engage with everything that's happened with her previously in the play?
Well, I think the fact that the playwright has brought in Athena as a deus ex machina, perhaps, it's not clear how it would be staged, whether it was, on a machine or whether somehow she was just at a different level, is the same question. I mean, there's a way in which the epiphany of Athena eclipses any kind of private emotions that Creusa or Ion might have. In other words, I guess there's a sense that when there's an epiphany of Athena, it dwarfs what the humans have suffered. And there's some kind of bigger picture, but I don't know that Euripides buys into that. I think he presents it, but I'm not sure that Creusa's last word is definitive for how the audience, who really has the last word, will take this tragedy.
Well, and I think, generally when I teach like a deus ex machina, I teach it as if it's a Platonic aporia, right? It's a moment to go back through. It's an invitation to think about the play. And really what happens at the end of this play that's fascinating is it's doubly operatic in a way, right? It has Athena come in and resolve all the problems magically, and you're like, okay. And then Creusa comments on it and improves it, and which is it drives it home even more. And so I'm wondering, where does this put us before we bring the actors in this theme of sort of justice and the power of the gods? Are we left in sort of a similar lack, pathlessness about how we can even resolve the problem? Or do you see sort of breadcrumbs in the play leading us to some sort of different conclusion?
I think the play challenges, but I don't know that it provides breadcrumbs or definitive answers. I don't think so. But I also, with the Bacchae, for example, which is quite a different play, you're left with chilling negative results, complete destruction. And you're still provoked to think your way out of it, or to think your way to some kind of understanding.
Yeah. And
I never get to closure. I never get complete closure from those kinds of plays of Euripides.
And I think that's part of his sort of power as a playwright. And what I get a little bit in Athena's speech at the end is this, especially in some of, compared to some of, or along with some of Euripides' later plays, is you have these sort of fantastic, happy-ish endings that you really have to just believe in, right? You have to change your point of view, change your perspective, and then, hey, something's all right. And it really sort of reflects on the power of belief to sort of supplant truth, right? And to sort of create your perspective on the world. And I don't know if we should, how cynical we should be at the end, but that's left to sort of interpretation.
I wonder if Euripides himself as a playwright oscillated between complete despair and skepticism and hope.
You know what? I think that may be one of the more insightful things I've heard about Euripides in a while. And part of the reason I feel that is, living through big events and traumatic times. Like, you do move through different interpretations, you change your opinion. And sometimes that fantasy of believing things can be all right is so appealing.
It is very appealing. It's very appealing. And I've had that experience with our current state of affairs, that, I don't really want to sit in despair about American politics, about the epidemic, the COVID-19 situation, the war in Ukraine, the state of adolescence in this country and around the world. I don't want to have a litany going through my head all the time of all the things that are topsy-turvy, including big one, climate change and possible disappearance of islands. I mean, really, it's heavy. So, but I do think that Euripides' plays speak to our times in a very powerful way, because there's no simple solution. Even if he provides a neat resolution of everything, you still step back and wonder, whew, that's nice, but is that really happened to me?
Well, and and as someone, again, a non-expert in Euripides, but part of what we've seen in his later plays in this series is the exploration of our will to believe a certain thing, right? You mentioned Bacchae. Think about Tiresias and Cadmus at the beginning of the play saying, hey, it's not so bad to go along with the gods. In this play, like, it's all traumatic. Then at the end, you're like, well, if Apollo and Athena say it's supposed to be that way, it's all right. And there's that desire to say, well, you know what? Seventh wave of COVID isn't really happening. Maybe we shouldn't test anymore. We can go outside and act like it's normal.
That's a disastrous pathway, though.
I know, but it's all about, it's sometimes what do you need to get by? And so I wonder, like, how much are the plays navigating that similar space?
Interesting. It's interesting.
Right. So Hannah and Paul, do you want to join us? I think, probably got the closest to the stage, or at least the actors in a Euripidean play that we've had, and that there are only a couple of you, as opposed to some of our largest tasks. How did this sort of two-person performance of the play come about, and how was it different from some of our other experiences?
Well, I think, part of this, in a way, and it's part of the series as well, isn't it, is that it's come out of necessity sometimes, where we've had certain restrictions on us, and obviously the series started because we were all in lockdown and we could connect over Zoom, and then sometimes along the way, sometimes it's not possible to cast lots of people and get everyone involved because of schedules and things like that. But it's something that actually that we sort of work on a lot as actors. Anyway, a lot of the shows that we do, we perform as sort of just the two of us, or with not many people, and do lots of multi-rolling and things like that. So it felt like a nice opportunity to really sort of strip that back and really kind of try out to see what is it like hearing these the sort of roles of characters being kind of coming from one particular person, and what does that add to it, and how does that layer things up? Yeah.
So, Hannah, you had to, I think both characters, Iona and Creusa, change a lot in the play, or at least change what they say. I think Creusa's given the most range or demand. When Paul said, hey, you're going to do this character, did you want to say no? Or were you like, yes, look at how much depth there is here?
Yeah, I think I thought, yeah, look at how much depth there is. Um, I think, well, I'm a mum of two small girls, and I, you know, thinking about that feeling of not knowing where your child is just, oh God, it just is massive, isn't it? Can't even find the words. So yeah, I thought it was a really interesting and obviously really interesting that you just get to see it. You get to see her without her child and then with her child and then saying, "Let's go home. Everything's all right. It's okay that I've been raped and I've been going through this for this many, this for my lifetime." But oh yeah, but obviously it's not okay.
Yeah.
It can't be okay. It can never be okay, can it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, for me, it's so bewildering to make sense, to even try to make sense of those experiences. And like you guys, with small kids, like the gut punch, the lack of any language to describe what it would like to not know where they are. But at the same time, to like have that come out of such traumatic violence. So Nancy, before we sort of try wrapping up, what do you have any reflections on the performance or questions for the actors?
Yeah, well, I thought that the denouement from the time that the basket is brought out, and even just the scene from that to up to the epilogue of Athena, I thought it was very persuasive, very convincing, and not too sudden. I was afraid that it would seem facile, that the two of them who had just practically murdered one another or tried to, she especially had almost poisoned her child. I mean, I thought that maybe because there was so much empathy flowing back and forth earlier in the play, and it seems like structurally the playwright set up this yearning from the son, the child, for his mother, and the yearning of the mother to find her son. And so there was all that yearning going in both directions, and respect that Ion had for the mother, the absent mother who was the surrogate for Creusa, and all that mourning that Creusa had for this child who had missed out on his mother's nursing and so on, set us up for this poignancy of the embrace between the two. So I really felt that was convincing, and maybe even much more powerful than Athena wrapping it all up. I thought it was all pretty well worked out. The other thing is I have some knowledge through a close person of a rape taking place, not from a god, of course, but I've been thinking a lot about recovery, and about how, there have been so many young women and also young men who have been raped and who do regain their life. It's not like life is over at that point. There's help out there, and there's a way. In fact, when I was teaching at UGA, I counseled a girl in my class who looked devastated one day, and she came in I asked her to come and talk to me. She had been gang raped at a donut store at 11 at night. She'd been forced into a car and raped. And I remember counseling her, and I don't know where it came from, on the fact that if you let go of your autonomy under those circumstances, if you lived a life dominated by that event, it was a way of letting those victimizers victimize you, that you had to somehow find a way where you could reclaim your life. And I think that is an important aspect. And Creusa, you could teach this play as a recovery story, where it's not so much Athena or Apollo orchestrating, although that happens too, but Creusa herself has taken an active role to go to Delphi as a sort of pilgrim, as a theates is the word used in the play, to secure information, because she's been at the mercy of this event for years, and she's kept it a secret. And at some point later in the play, in the part that you acted, she says, I'm not going to keep it to myself anymore. Here's what happened. And so she outs herself. She pronounces what happened. And that's there's a lot of therapy going on in this play. Maybe one thing you were raising, Joel, about believability is that on the human level, can we say that recovery takes place for Creusa and for Ion? Because that seems to be, there's a healing aspect to this play. And even if the gods weren't up there and out there.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a good thing. You know, we often think about what's the miraculous, what's the mythical, but at the end, we also have that's human and the real emotions and experiences going on, and how would have different audiences responded to this trauma, right? And you know, the modeling being done and how to live through it. And Creusa definitely gives us a complicated picture here. So Hannah and Paul, I thank you again. Like, it's always a pleasure. Paul, we talk all the time. Hannah, you're there in the background. I love to see you do your work. And I'm impressed that the girls stayed asleep during all of that. So they get a special reward at some point. Paul, before we close up shop, you have some announcements for us?
Yeah, just a couple of announcements. The first one to say that we will return in 2 weeks with Prometheus Bound, and that will be the final episode of this season of Reading Greek Tragedy Online, which means we'll have gone from in person in Boston, we'll have been at Athens, the Danaids, Eon today, and then Prometheus Bound. So do join us for that. That's on June the 1st, Wednesday, June the 1st at 3 p.m. Eastern or 8 p.m. here in the UK. And also just a reminder that we have a competition, Playing Dionysus, that is open to all students in North America, be they at the high school level or at the university level. The details are on a link that I think will be appearing very shortly by the side of this video. And it's on the Out of Chaos website, and all the details are there, but you choose a scene from the back eye, and we will you then record it, send it in to us, and there are cash prizes to be won thanks to the generosity of the SCS. So do please get involved with that. We also are running competitions in a similar vein in Italy and also in Greece at the moment. So go to the website and check those out, and we'd love to see your interpretations of some of these tragedies.
So I want to thank Nancy for being here with us. Nancy, you're amazing. Hannah and Paul for performing it. I know that there's some difficult subject matter in the play, so we put a couple links for survivors on the YouTube site if you need some supporter information. We will be gathering in another couple of weeks for the final performance of this half of the year, I think, with Prometheus, as Paul said, 3 p.m. EST on what was that? On June 1st. We're going to start June with some torture of divinities. Until then, thank you again to Ali, to Olivia and Danielle for being here to support us, to the entire team, the Cosmos Society, Center for Atlantic Studies, John Coley, who makes our images, Ali, who puts them together. In the meantime, the weather's nice. Go outside, enjoy it where you can. Stay safe, stay well. And I hope to see many of you again soon. Take care.